Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question for a moment. When that day comes, and it will come, whether we are ready for it or not, what exactly do you think is going to save you? Think about it. Not what you hope will save you. Not what you assume will save you because you were born into a Muslim family, or because your name sounds Islamic, or because you fast in Ramadan and post a nice reminder on social media once in a while. I am asking you honestly, deep down, what do you believe is going to carry you through on that day when everything else falls away? Because here is the truth, and I say this with love, but also with the seriousness it deserves. On that day, your wealth will not save you. Your position will not save you. Your family name, your followers, your connections, your degrees, none of it will matter. The only thing that will matter first and foremost, before anything else is even considered, is whether your heart contains sincere faith in the oneness of Allah. Everything else in your life, every good deed, every charity, every prayer, every act of kindness, all of it is built on top of this one foundation. And if the foundation is cracked, if the foundation is not there, then no matter how beautiful the building looks from the outside, it will not stand. I want you to imagine building a house. You spend years on it. You choose the finest tiles, the most elegant furniture, the most expensive fixtures. Visitors walk in and they are amazed. They say, "What a beautiful home." But underneath, there is no foundation. There is nothing holding it up. One day, without warning, the ground shifts and the entire house collapses, no matter how beautiful it looked. This is exactly the parable of a person whose outward deeds look impressive, but whose heart lacks the true foundation of belief. It does not matter how many people praised him. It does not matter how many people thought she was pious. What matters is what was underneath, what was in the heart, what the foundation was truly built on. Now some of you might be thinking, but I already believe in Allah. I already say the declaration of faith. I already know there is no God but Allah. So what is the concern here? And this is exactly where I want to slow down. Because belief is not simply a statement you utter once and then forget about. Belief, real belief, sincere belief, is something that has to live in you, breathe in you, shape the way you see the world, shape the way you make decisions, shape the way you treat people, shape the way you spend your money, shape the way you speak, shape everything. It is not a badge you wear. It is not a label you carry. It is the very lens through which you experience every single moment of your existence. Think about the people who came before us, the earliest generations of believers. Many of them faced torture, exile, hunger, and death simply because they refused to let go of this one truth, that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah. They were offered wealth to abandon it. They were offered status to abandon it. They were offered safety to abandon it. And they refused, not because they were stubborn for the sake of being stubborn, but because this truth had settled so deeply into their hearts that abandoning it would have felt like abandoning their very soul. That is the kind of belief we are talking about. Not a surface level belief. Not a belief of convenience. A belief that becomes the core of who you are. And here is something that many people overlook. Belief is not just about believing that Allah exists. Even those who deny faith, even those who claim to reject the idea of a creator altogether, when you truly examine human nature, there is something inside almost every person that recognizes there is a greater power at work in this universe. Look at what happens when people are in genuine distress, when a person is drowning, when a person is trapped, when a person feels utterly helpless and there is no one else around to turn to. In those raw, desperate moments, something inside the human being reaches out beyond itself. It calls out. It searches for a higher power to rescue it. This is embedded within us. This is part of our fitrah, our natural disposition. So believing that a creator exists is not really the hard part for most people, if they are honest with themselves. The real test, the real depth of faith is in believing that this creator alone deserves worship, that nothing else, no idol, no wealth, no status, no human being, no created thing, deserves the devotion, the reliance, the hope, and the fear that belongs to Allah alone. This is what Tawheed truly means. It means recognizing that Allah alone is the one who creates, the one who sustains, the one who gives life, the one who takes it away, the one who provides, the one who protects, and therefore Allah alone deserves to be worshipped, obeyed, and loved above everything else. Now let's bring this into real life, because I don't want this to remain some abstract, theoretical concept floating in the air. Let's talk about how this actually plays out day to day. How many of us, if we are honest, sometimes place our hope more in a job, more in a particular person, more in money in the bank, than we do in Allah? How many of us feel a sense of security when our bank balance looks healthy, but feel a sense of panic and emptiness the moment it drops, forgetting entirely that provision comes from Allah and Allah alone? This is where sincere faith gets tested. Not in the mosque when everyone is watching, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching. When you are alone with your thoughts and your fears. Let me give you an example that many of us can relate to. Picture a person who has fallen seriously ill. The doctors have given up hope. The family is gathered around, waiting, fearing the worst. Now, in that moment, does this person's heart turn entirely to the doctor, entirely to the medicine, entirely to the machines in the room? Or does something inside them, even the doctors themselves sometimes, reach beyond all of that and say, only Allah can save this person now? This is the moment where true belief shows itself. Not the outward declaration you might have said with your tongue 1,000 times, but the sincere, trembling reliance of the heart when everything else has failed. This is exactly why the scholars have always said that faith is not simply a statement of the tongue. It is a conviction of the heart that then manifests in the actions of the limbs. All three must align. The tongue declares it, the heart believes it with certainty, and the limbs act upon it through obedience. If any one of these three is missing, something is deeply wrong. You can have someone who declares faith with their tongue beautifully, who recites the most eloquent words, but if their heart carries doubt, resentment, or arrogance, and if their limbs never actually submit to what they claim to believe, then something is broken in that structure. I think about the story of those who came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and declared their faith with their tongues, yet their hearts had not truly absorbed it. Allah speaks about this directly, describing how some people say they believe, but faith had not yet entered their hearts. This should make every single one of us pause and reflect, because it is entirely possible to go through the motions, to say the right words, to be recognized publicly as a believer, and yet for the heart to still be distant, still be attached to other things, still be searching for security and comfort somewhere other than in the remembrance and reliance upon the Creator. So how then do we know if our faith is sincere? How do we check ourselves? I want to give you some practical ways to examine your own heart, because self-examination is one of the most powerful tools a believer has. The first way to check is by looking at where you turn in times of hardship. When calamity strikes, when you lose something precious, when a relationship breaks, when your health fails, when your finances collapse, where does your heart run first? Does it run to complaining, to despair, to blaming everyone around you, or does it run, even if imperfectly, even if with tears and struggle, to prostration, to supplication, to seeking Allah's help and mercy? This single test alone reveals so much about the state of a person's faith. The second way to check is by looking at your obedience when no one is watching. It is easy to behave well when people can see you, when your reputation is on the line, when your image matters to those around you. But what do you do in private? What do you do when the lights are off and no one else knows? This is where sincerity truly reveals itself, because the God you claim to believe in sees you in both places equally. If your behavior changes drastically depending on who is watching, this is a signal that your faith might still be more about people than about the one who truly matters. The third way to check is by examining your reaction to the commands that are difficult for you personally. It is easy to embrace the parts of faith that align with what you already wanted to do anyway. But what about the parts that go against your desires? What about the commands that require you to give up something you love, to forgive someone who hurt you deeply, to be patient when every part of you wants to react, To remain honest when lying would benefit you? These are the true tests of submission. Because submission by definition means submitting even when it is hard, even when it costs you something, even when your own ego resists. Now, some might ask, why is this foundation so critically important on the day of judgment specifically? Why does this outweigh everything else? Let me explain this with the utmost clarity. On that day, every single deed will be brought forward and weighed. The scales will be set up, and nothing, absolutely nothing will be treated unjustly. But here is the critical point. The deeds of a person who lacked this foundational sincere faith, no matter how outwardly impressive those deeds appeared, will be like scattered dust, blown away, carrying no weight whatsoever. This is not because Allah is unfair. It is because those deeds were never truly connected to their proper source. They were like a tree that grew without roots, appearing green and full of life for a while, but with nothing anchoring it to sustain it when the storm finally arrives. Think about the people who spent their lives building schools, hospitals, feeding the poor, all done for the sake of being remembered, for the sake of a legacy, for the sake of praise and recognition, without ever connecting these actions back to sincere devotion to the Creator. On the surface, the world called them generous, called them heroes, called them philanthropists. And there is no denying the tremendous impact of what they built. But if none of that action was rooted in genuine submission and love for Allah, if it was purely about their own image and legacy, then on that day, this entire effort will not carry the weight they assumed it would carry. This should terrify us in the most productive way, not to make us despair, but to make us urgently examine our own intentions before it becomes too late to fix them. At the same time, and this is equally important, I want you to feel hope here, not just fear, because the flip side of this truth is incredibly beautiful. It means that even the smallest deed, even something as simple as removing a harmful object from a pathway, even a smile given to another person, even a small word of kindness, if it is rooted in sincere faith and done for the sake of Allah, carries a weight on that day that might exceed deeds that looked far grander to the human eye. This is the mercy hidden within this entire principle. It is not about how big your actions look to others. It is about how sincere your heart was in offering them. I want to talk now about something that many people struggle with, which is doubt. Some of you listening to this might be dealing with genuine doubts about your faith. Moments where you question, moments where certainty feels distant, moments where you wonder if any of this is even real. I want to address this honestly, because pretending doubt does not exist helps no one. The scholars throughout history have addressed this exact struggle, and many of the greatest believers in history went through seasons of intense internal questioning before arriving at a deeper, more mature, more resilient faith. Doubt itself is not necessarily the enemy. What matters is what you do with that doubt. Do you run from it and pretend it does not exist, letting it fester silently and grow into something more dangerous? Or do you confront it honestly, seek knowledge, ask questions, engage with scholars and sincere seekers, and allow that struggle to actually deepen your understanding and strengthen your conviction over time? I always encourage people, especially the youth, do not be ashamed of your questions. Do not bury your uncertainty out of fear of being judged. Bring it into the light. Study, reflect. Look at the signs around you, the intricate design of the universe, the perfect balance in nature, the miracle of your own existence, and allow your intellect and your heart to work together towards certainty. Faith that has been tested and has survived that testing is often far stronger than faith that was simply inherited and never examined. Now let's return to the heart of what we are discussing, because I want to make sure this lands in a practical way in your daily life, not just as a nice piece of a speech that you nod along to and then forget by tomorrow morning. Ask yourself this. When you wake up tomorrow morning, what will be the first thought in your heart? Will it be gratitude to the one who allowed you to open your eyes again? Or will it simply be rushing straight into the demands of the day without a single thought given to the source of all that you have? This tiny moment, This tiny habit of beginning your day in remembrance is one small but powerful way of nurturing that foundation of sincere faith, keeping it alive, keeping it fresh, keeping it from becoming a distant memory buried beneath the noise of daily life. Ask yourself this as well. When you are given a choice between a shortcut that involves dishonesty and the harder path that involves integrity, which one do you choose? Not in theory, but in your actual daily life, in business, in relationships, in small transactions that nobody else will ever notice. This is where sincere faith is either nurtured or slowly eroded, decision by decision, moment by moment. I also want to touch on something that is often misunderstood, and that is the relationship between fear and hope in the heart of a believer. Sincere faith is not simply about fearing punishment, and it is not simply about hoping for reward either. It is a delicate, beautiful balance of both. A believer should fear falling short, fear displeasing the one who created them, fear the consequences of neglect and heedlessness. And at the very same time, that same believer should hold on to hope, hope in mercy, hope in forgiveness. Hope that no matter how many times they have stumbled, the door of return is always open as long as breath remains in their body. Too much fear without hope leads to despair, and despair itself becomes a kind of spiritual poison. Too much hope without fear leads to carelessness, to a false sense of security that allows sin to be taken lightly. The heart of sincere faith holds both of these together, like two wings that allow a bird to fly. Remove one wing, and the bird falls. I think of the story of a man who, according to what has been narrated, in his final moments felt his sins were too great to be forgiven. He instructed his own children to burn his body after his death and scatter his ashes, thinking somehow this could hide him from being resurrected and held accountable. So overwhelmed was he by fear of what he had done. And yet, despite this desperate, almost illogical act born purely out of terror, the mercy extended to him, because somewhere within that fear was an acknowledgement, an awareness, however distorted, of the reality of accountability and a recognition of his own shortcomings. This story is often shared precisely to demonstrate the vastness of mercy available to those who never gave up entirely, who never fell into the trap of assuming there is no return possible. Compare this to someone who lives with complete arrogance, complete indifference, no fear whatsoever of ever answering for their actions. That kind of heart is in a far more dangerous place than the heart that trembles, even excessively, out of awareness of its own flaws. So what I want every single person listening to internalize is this. Building sincere faith is not a one-time event. It is not something you achieve once and then move on from, checking a box that says complete. It is a lifelong process of nurturing, protecting, feeding, and returning to again and again. Just like a plant needs consistent water and sunlight to survive, your faith needs consistent nourishment through remembrance, through knowledge, through good company, through moments of reflection, through turning back whenever you feel yourself drifting. One of the most beautiful things about focusing on this foundation is that it actually simplifies everything else in your life. When your heart is anchored in sincere devotion to the Creator alone, you stop chasing the approval of every single person around you. You stop living in constant anxiety about what others think of your choices. You stop measuring your worth by comparison to your neighbors, your colleagues, your relatives. Because your sense of purpose, your sense of direction, your sense of value comes from a source that does not fluctuate, does not betray you, and does not abandon you the way people sometimes do. This single shift in where your reliance is placed can transform every other area of your life, your relationships, your career decisions, your emotional stability, your ability to handle setbacks with grace instead of despair. I also want to remind everyone that this foundation of sincere faith is not meant to make you withdraw from the world or become disconnected from your responsibilities. Quite the opposite. True faith should push you further into engagement with life, into serving your family well, into working hard and honestly, into contributing positively to your community, into being a source of good wherever you are placed. The person with strong, sincere faith should be recognizable not simply by their private worship, but by the way they conduct themselves in the marketplace, in their home, in their friendships, and in every corner of society they touch. Faith that stays locked inside the heart and never manifests outward into good character and good action has missed the entire point. So as we prepare our hearts for that day, the day when nothing will be hidden, the day when every secret intention will be laid bare, let each of us return to this most basic and most essential question. Is my heart truly anchored in sincere devotion to my Creator, or has it quietly drifted toward other attachments while I was busy with the distractions of daily life? Let this question not be one that we ask once and move past, but one that we return to again and again in our quiet moments, in our moments of decision, in our moments of difficulty and ease alike. Because on that day, when everything else has been stripped away, when wealth cannot speak for you, when position cannot speak for you, when family cannot speak for you, it will be this alone, the sincerity and truth of what was living inside your heart, that determines whether the rest of your life's effort stood upon solid ground or upon sand that gave way the moment it was truly tested. Let that be the foundation you return to starting today, not tomorrow.